So, good afternoon. Hello and welcome to this Chartered Bankers Institute webinar. My name's Claire Tunley. I'm the Chief Executive of the Financial Services Skills Commission, and I'll be your host for today. Our topic today is learning culture, and specifically the role of professional bodies in fostering a learning culture across the sector. We know that financial services is an ever-changing industry with drivers such as digitisation, automation, geopolitical tensions, changing customer expectations, which mean we have to constantly adapt, innovate and evolve to remain competitive. This means that we need to ensure the skills of our people and our own skills are up to date. At the Financial Services Skills Commission, we work with our firms to identify the skills they need for the future and then build these skills in the workforce. And firms we know are offering lots of learning activity in lots of different ways, hackathons, learning academies, apprenticeships, and our chartered bodies also offer structured learning and a professional framework. However, to achieve our learning ambitions, we really need to have a learning culture, make that learning really part of our day-to-day thinking. So we're going to look today at what learning culture is, hear about how firms and chartered bodies are working to build and embed a learning culture. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, or let them introduce themselves in a second. But firstly, about me. As I mentioned, I'm the Chief Exec at the Financial Services Skills Commission. We work with firms in financial services. We've got 40 members employing over 300,000 people. And what our aim is to work with members to help them build the supply of skills that they need now and in the future. So today I'm joined by three fantastic panelists, and I'll ask each of them to introduce themselves. So Jen, I'm going to start with you.
Thanks very much, Claire, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jen Tippin. I'm the Chief People and Transformation Officer at NatWest Group, also a member of the board at the Financial Services Skills Commission.
Thanks, Jen. Tanya.
Hi, thank you, Claire. So my name's Tanya Retta. I'm the Executive Director of Education for the Chartered Banker Institute. And we have a global voice with over 33,000 members now that really look to support and provide those all-important skills and capability to help socially responsible professional bankers.
Thanks, Tanya. And Victoria.
Victoria Partington. I'm Assistant Director of Qualifications at the CISI. We offer a wide variety of CPD and learning content to our members who work in the securities and investment industry.
Thank you and welcome. We have got the opportunity for taking questions from the audience, so do put them in the chat. We're going to go through a bit of a conversation first, but do put them into the Q&A or the chat on your Zoom browser. But I'm going to get started on some of the questions. And first of all, if we talk about learning culture, how do we know we've got one? So Tanya, I'm going to come to you first. What is it?
Oh, great question. So you know, to me, we're looking at learning cultures in any organization. It's where we're really fostering that environment which encourages employees to continually seek to share, apply new knowledge and skills, and improve their own and organizational performance. And that can be done in many different ways. And learning culture is one of those things that you can sort of feel and taste as you go into organizations. And obviously, in terms of knowing it's there are some metrics and data points that are always important to consider, particularly those that are related to learning or training interventions, and also the all-important employee engagement. But I find that actually looking closer at probably less tangible data points can be more telling for any organisation. And if we look at from a supportive perspective in the organisation, do we see those continuous learning opportunities? Do we have an abundance of opportunities for learning that is accessible for all employees? That may be very blended and presented in different ways, whether it's workshops, training sessions, whether it's learning platforms, mentoring, that also tie in with business objectives to really help that individual and that learner understand their part in the broader achievement of organisational goals. And what I see and what I've seen across many very successful organisations is good, strong leadership support, where the leaders promote and model those learning behaviours. They're continuously looking to spend time on their own learning and development, as well as promoting it for others, whether that's through collaboration or knowledge sharing, or actually getting their sleeves rolled up into some specific learning interventions. And then the great thing is what you start to see from employees then is this real, as I talked about a moment ago, curiosity, questioning, seeking to actually really ask questions and challenge the status quo to make sure that there's always ways to do things differently and better. And I know we've probably all heard the fail fast, learn fast attitude, but that really is supportive around a learning environment that actually doesn't focus on what's not working, but actually how we can always improve with that growth mindset. So that underpinned with some really strong coaching, feedback mechanisms in place, I see really do support that creation of a learning culture, but nurturing also then as a result of that great innovation and creativity.
No, thanks, Tanya. So some things you can measure, but also just look and feel, and then the impact on the business crucially as well. I know, Victoria, from a chartered professional body point of view, what does learning culture mean for you?
I think from our point of view, we look to offer a wide range of different learning content to our members. So we cross different aspects of financial services, but we also look at areas such as soft skills, and we try to have an offer that will support individuals throughout their career as their roles change and evolve. We're conscious of the different needs of our members. They may be at different stages of their career. They may have different preferred learning styles. And we're constantly working to develop products that help to upskill and reskill learners at different stages, as well as just for new learners. So it includes CPD content from introductory through to higher level material, advanced skills, more technical content, soft skills that can assist people in their careers at whatever stage they are, and that will stimulate them to explore the content that we have on offer on their own, not necessarily directed. And by having a breadth of offer, we hope to be able to facilitate that and to allow them to look at new areas, perhaps related areas to ones that they're in, but not necessarily things that are relating to their immediate role or career.
That's a pull through. Yeah. What does it lead you to? That curiosity coming through.
Yeah.
And Jen, you're responsible for a lot of employees learning, and tell us about how you approach this at NatWest. How do you get the balance between what you as an organisation would want people to learn, but also what their responsibilities around learning might be as well?
Yeah, it is a two-way thing, I think, Claire. It is absolutely the case that there are definitely skills we want our colleagues to pick up and enhance, but there is a need for individuals to take responsibility for that as well, and their own development and their own upskilling. I guess for us, it starts first of all from our purpose. Our purpose as a business, we have nearly 20 million customers. Our role is really all around championing potential of families, people, and businesses. That's our purpose as a business. And in order to do that successfully, in order to really champion potential, you need to foster a culture of lifelong learning and curiosity. And alongside our purpose, we also have a set of values, one of which is curious. And in fact, we co-created those values with about 20,000 of our colleagues last year. And the reason why Curious came out, I think, and why we were really pleased to see that coming directly from our people, was that we think that it is so linked back to our purpose around championing potential. That's for our customers and the businesses that we support, but also, of course, our colleagues who have a lot of untapped potential that we can help to unlock. So for us, this sort of lifelong learning and being curious is at the heart of our value set. And that means, encouraging experimentation, encouraging testing and trialing new ways of doing things, being creative, being courageous, learning from failure, learning from mistakes, and continuous improvement, and really driving that value. So that is very important. And I think the other thing that we can do is try and create the capacity for people to pick up that learning. So one of the things we did last year was give every one of our 65,000 colleagues 2 days a year to dedicate to their own learning and development, in particular in picking up skills for the future, because we're very cognizant of the fact that our business is changing, our customers are changing. Many of the traditional role types that we have within within our bank are changing, and the sort of half-life of skills is reducing. And so if we do nothing as an employer, many of our colleagues will not have the right skills for the future. And as a business that takes responsibility, I think, for our people and for our customers, we know that we need to create the capacity and the time for our people to upskill themselves and really future-proof their skills. So we give, as I say, our colleagues 2 days a year. They spend that time on developing their skills for the future. In total, that's around 2.5 million hours that we will invest in future-focused development between now and 2026. And what we find is that about 50% of our elective learning is now based on skills for the future. Skills like data, digital literacy, cyber, engineering, software development, AI, all of those types of skills, which we know are going to be critical to our business going forward. That's what we create the capacity for our colleagues to focus on. So it is both about, I think, individuals taking that responsibility, as you say, Claire, but it's also about, us as an employer creating the time for our people to focus on that.
No, that makes sense. I'm interested in the curiosity piece, because I think we sort of all mentioned that in some way. Do you, as a follow-up to that, how do you measure that? How do you kind of quantify that, that you're developing that sort of that curiosity and curiosity thinking and that inquiring mind?
Yeah, we run a survey twice a year. It's called our View survey, and about 85% of our colleagues take part and participate in that survey. And we ask a number of questions in there, ranging from leadership through to all sorts of areas around, the proposition for our colleagues, how it feels to work in the team that they're working in. But some of the question sets that we have are around, do colleagues feel that they have the opportunity to develop their skills? Is there a culture within their team and within their function or their franchise to really learn from mistakes? And we can quantify the level of curiosity that we think is prevalent within our business, but also we look at the extent to which experiments are taking place, testing, learning, piloting, trying, what level of innovation is being driven in our business. And so those are some of the ways in which we measure it. But a lot of it, as we've been speaking before, comes back to culture and leadership and, creating, first of all, making our colleagues feel that it's important, which is why it's one of our values, but also giving people the time to really focus on them and their skills and their future.
No, thank you. I think you, like you say, it's that people wanting to see it's an important thing they want to do. They want to invest their time in, because I think some people do have a view of learning. It's a tick box thing. I need to do the AML or whatever the latest regulation. I need to tick the box. But actually, how can we nudge people towards learning rather than and seeing that value, rather than just seeing it as a thing that I need to do and I need to tick that box? Victoria, is that something that you could comment on, how we can provide those nudges?
I think one of the things that we do at the CISI, we have recently launched a new learning platform, and within that, it allows us to produce curated collections of content. So different types of content, whether it's a professional refresher or some TV or sound bites, micro modules, all kinds of different things that we can pull together and promote, as it were, as a curated content in a particular subject area, so that if somebody goes into the platform, is perhaps interested in one product, it will lead them then to other related products or products covering slightly different but related subjects, which will allow them to explore what we have on offer more, but also to follow their own noses as to where they want to go with their learning. And I think that's quite important. It also, we try to make sure that we have a diverse offer of different styles of learning, different types of content delivered in different ways, so that people can also come in and out if they only have a short amount of time. They can look at a longer reflective piece if they want to. They can tie in things to events that they might have gone to. But if they only have 5 minutes, then we've got an offer that helps with that as well. And I think the FCA changing its rules on duration of CPD has been incredibly helpful in that respect as well.
No, thank you. And Jen, is that something that you're kind of building in then those nudges to sort of get people to more align their own learning journey?
Yes, I mean, I think there's a couple of builds on what Victoria's mentioned already. So we have something called the NatWest Group Academy that gives colleagues access to much of the content. And as I say, we make the time for people to dedicate some time to using that content. I think the other thing that we do in terms of nudges is through one of our systems, Workday, we also have the opportunity to direct some personalised content to colleagues as well, based on what we know about their skills, their capabilities, their current role, their aspirations for the future. So that enables us to, make it feel much more of a personalised experience, which I think is really, really important. So it isn't just about ticking a box or completing a certain module. It's something that's really, really relevant to them and where they are and what they think about their future career. So that's been super, super helpful actually in helping it feel much more that colleagues are taking control of their own development, their own learning, and what that might mean for them and their future career. There's a few tools as well that we give colleagues to help them with that. So we have something called a critical people capability checker. That's a diagnostic set of tools where colleagues can really start this journey of personalised learning. So that gives them a baseline of where their capabilities are, and it helps them then create a personalised programme of learning and development which is relevant to them and where they are in their career. So those are just a few examples of some of the nudges that we put in place. But fundamentally, as I said before, I think it starts with leadership and culture and values and purpose, and that all ties back to that.
Definitely, thank you. And I think one of the things we often hear when we talk about learning is some of those barriers. Why this is why we can't do it, or this is why it's difficult. And it might be helpful to share some findings of some research that we did at the Commission last year around the barriers for learning and creating a learning culture. And we found kind of 6 key ones, and they probably aren't any surprise, but time was the most common barrier. Everyone said, I haven't got enough time, I'm busy. And engage, trying to free up some of that time to engage in learning is really, really important. So no surprises there. The second one that came out was budget. Costs too much, can't afford it. But actually, there was a variation because some firms found that as a motivator to find different ways of providing learning. So whether it's through shadowing or the more cost effective or cost efficient, cheaper ways to provide that learning, but still being able to manage and track the benefit that individuals are getting, and some low cost solutions, some really creative ideas that are coming out. So budget can be a barrier, but doesn't always have to be. Motivations, awareness was a key thing that came out. So, people feel the value of learning. Are they aware of what's available? There's a lot of comms campaigns and comms activity to make sure people know about what's available. Leadership was the fourth one that came out. You've mentioned that, Jen. It can be enabler, it can be a blocker, that tone from the top. Role modeling, what's your leader learning today? Wouldn't that be nice to know? What are they learning next week? Those kinds of things can really be a motivator. That came out quite strongly in the work. The fifth area was information. And it's less about awareness, it's more clarity around what skills might be useful. So we could all go and learn lots of interesting things, but actually some people want a bit of clarity around where their role might be developing and what might be useful from a professional point of view or the organizational point of view. That pathway was quite key, but with some sort of flexibility within that structure. And finally, it was the final thing that came out as a barrier was psychological safety. Really links to leadership, but is your manager going to value this? If you're spending time learning, is that something that's going to be recognised and valued? And that does come down as the tone from the top as well. So those were the things that we found in our work. And you can't look at one of those barriers in isolation. They do interlink. You're all nodding. So I don't know if you've got anyone wants to build on those.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time on, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. And we heard that loud and clear from our colleagues, which is why we said, actually, do you know what, we are going to give you the time to do it, because otherwise it's just another thing that gets added to the list. So I think that's absolutely key. Culture and leadership I've talked about. I think it's so pivotal to creating a culture of lifelong learning, learning from mistakes, and really encouraging that sort of test and learn approach. I think on psychological safety as well, you're quite right. If your boss doesn't consider it important, or if your boss thinks that spending time on learning is something that takes you away or is a distraction from the core of your work or the core sort of to-do list, and we're all, of course, always also busy, that can be a real detractor, I think, for colleagues. And again, it goes back to the importance of really setting that tone from the top and making sure that it's a really core part of your values. So yeah, those all resonate to me as obstacles that we need to constantly sort of try and knock down.
Yeah, no, thank you. Tanya or Victoria, any comments?
The only other piece I was going to build, and I was just reflecting on the first question around that culture piece, was to Jen's point, how does all the learning, as you've mentioned, really reflect back through to what I'm doing today, how it improves both my performance and that of the organisation, and having that sort of cut through clarity right the way through to help the learner understand how it all fits in, so that, to your point, there's lots and lots of content, but I know the things that are really going to help me and improve me in the way that I'm developing. That's so important. So I can see that.
Victoria, did you want to add anything?
No, I think it's pretty much
covered.
agree completely with what my colleagues have said.
Super, thank you. I just wanted to turn a little bit now to different approaches and different opinions of learning, particularly with within firms, demographic groups. There can be stereotypes around certain people want to learn more, some people don't. Do you find that that's relevant to learning strategies? Do you feel you have to change your approach, your messaging, your offer, depending on who in the organisation you're trying to target? And what can we do about it? Jen, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, look, I think it is about trying to make it as much as possible a personalised experience. I think learning is very personal. We all learn in different ways. It's not necessarily about age, but I think it's about the fact that we are all different. We all think differently and we all learn differently. And so I think choice is important. So providing active choice for colleagues to enable them to learn in different ways. And and as I mentioned before, providing those personalized suggestions, I think, that are really tailored, that are really relevant, that also give people the opportunity to take control, take accountability, and feel really empowered, for their own learning. Some people, we find, it's less about a formal training course, it's more about experience on the job. So, for us, one of the things that's been really quite successful is offering what we call gigs, which is an opportunity for people to take a short-term comment or even just a piece of work that can be accretive to their own learning and their own development. That's an example of something that I think is a bit different, that gives people the opportunity to do something that feels really real, it's authentic, it's a genuine piece of work, it's additive to their career and enables them to build different skills, potentially in an area that they haven't considered before, or try new things. So I do think it's about making that experience personalized as possible, but also giving colleagues the control and the empowerment to make their own choices.
No, thanks, Jen. And just a reminder that the audience can put questions into the chat, the Q&A, because we'll be opening up for responses to your questions. So do get them in. Just to move on and build what Jen was saying there. So Tanya and Victoria, how are professional bodies working with employers to build learning culture within firms? You know, you've a very sort of structured approach around professional development, etc. Changes happening with CPD, but certainly you are advocates of an ongoing learning, inquiring mind. So how can you work with firms to build that in? Tanya, come to you first.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I think all professional bodies play that pivotal role in helping to foster a really strong learning culture, specifically for us at the Chartered Banker Institute within the banking profession, where we're looking to really contribute to that ongoing education and growth and development of professionals as they go forward through their many different careers in the organisations. And we can do that by helping in various different ways. The Institute has a very strong voice in helping to set those standards and guidelines around what does professionalism look and feel like, both in the UK and also to support it globally, and helping to have real clear established standards of practice and guidelines for that continuous learning really helps to promote that culture where professionals strive to be the best they can be and have excellence and continuous improvement, which is so important. And alongside that, clearly, we very strongly promote ethical practices and practices of professionalism and ethics. So the professional body for us definitely sets and supports the standards that the organisations in banking are seeking to pursue. For the Institute itself, we do that by making sure that we've got some very strong accreditation and qualification and certification pathways that to everything we've just been describing are simple enough to provide the person, the student, the learner with the availability of continuous improvement in the role they're doing, as well as looking at their future skills and their future careers. So it's really helping them to think about where they are today and also in the future. And that's through vigorous learning, through examinations, and making sure that they've really got the ability to grow together as professionals. We've touched upon CPD many times already through this session, but that availability of continuous professional development resources is really important, and having it available when it's needed. This Consumer Duty new piece of CPD we've just launched recently was done to support the industry and professionals to deepen their understanding around specifics that are relevant to them in their role now. So having that available on good platforms for them when it's available and when they want to choose to be able to learn is really, really important in supporting that culture. We then continuously support it through recognising and celebrating their achievements. So whether that's actually in the learning or achievements in the profession, particularly as our professionals strive for that charter banker status, as well as in time become fellows of the Institute, really supporting and growing other professionals and advocating alongside it. So really helping to collaborate. And things like today, podcasts, webinars, conferences, anything that supports the way in which we can continually take bite-sized learning when we want to is really important for us. And I suppose lastly, we're a very strong voice and advocate for the industry that we're in. So having that safe place where we talk about that psychological safety to help people have a view and have a voice is very, very important for us. So very, very important in the work that we do.
No, thank you, Tanya. Victoria, from CISI point of view.
Absolutely, I would very much echo that. We look to act as a partner for our members throughout their career, so from introduction through to chartership or fellowship. We obviously have exams in place that allow people to perform the roles that they need to perform in a regulated environment, and that's very important. But we're also very keen to make sure that we can enrich that provision with learning content that isn't examined, so bite-sized learning, looking at new areas as they come on board, so fintech, AI, ESG. Often those are areas that are developing much more quickly than an exam would allow you to test, and actually having the content available and able to be updated quickly in response to what members' needs and in response to anything that comes out there that's new, whether it's regulatory, whether it's industry practice, whether it's new papers that are being written or areas of interest, then it's really important that we can respond to that as quickly as possible. And that we try and use as many different types of learning. So we're constantly looking for feedback from members and for feedback from firms, where we can offer a central voice or central assistance where all firms want the same sort of thing, but also other areas where it might be more specific to individual members. But we want to make sure that we reflect our desire to ensure that different learning styles are covered and that members can absorb the content in the best format for them that allows them to remain relevant within their role, whether it's completing structured CPD that they need to complete or doing an exam, or whether it's just enriching their current knowledge.
No, thank you. And I think your point about the speed of change and actually what things are suitable for longer term accreditations, qualifications, and what's quicker. And I think you've all mentioned different ways of building and learning, different offers. And I just wonder if, perhaps coming back to you initially, Victoria, what are the things that you're developing within your own organisation as well as through the Institute to sort of get your own, because we all have to learn. We're all part of the solution. So what are you introducing? And I think particularly around the speed point, the kind of nano credentials, and you hear about these things that are so moving so quickly. How can we get on top of that, but also not lose sight of the sort of longer term qualifications and development that are so important as well?
I mean, at the moment, our focus, we are about to launch a certificate in AI, which is CPD content, learning content that people can study, that deals with things like the ethics and regulation around AI. But over time, that will evolve, because that is a very fast-moving area. As a qualifications body and a learning body, we're also looking at how AI not only influences the businesses that we serve, our membership, but actually what we can do in the learning and assessment space to take advantage of and harness the skills and ideas and thoughts that are coming out of those areas. And I think that's probably going to be quite a big area to look at in the future, as to how we can harness some of those things and not just regard them as a potential threat. And, people talk about ChatGPT and cheating and all that kind of thing, but actually there are likely to be lots of ways in which things like assessments can be moved on through the use of AI in ways that we haven't even thought about yet.
No, thank you. Tanya?
Yes, and like my good colleague there, Victoria, I could probably ditto the above, just a different name in terms of the certificate that's coming out in Q1 around digital and AI evolution, because you're absolutely right, Claire, it's so fast moving. And I think what's really important and something we focus on strongly is ensuring that as we develop, we have the voice of our learner and our student in the room with us. So we have a learning council that we lean into to make sure that we're listening to what's relevant and what's really needed. And that comes from different organisationals that actually support us to make sure that we are creating the right content in delivery, as well as our member experience committee as well. So having that voice is very important. And AI is the one that's driving a lot of the change. But at the same time, you've mentioned the micro-credentials. So having this idea of being able to have shorter bite-sized learning that actually rolls up and becomes almost a broader certificate for you is definitely an area that we are focused and looking at over the next year, because it actually supports what we said all along. It makes the learning more manageable, can be consumed across different platforms, and actually it's flexible, a shorter e-learning. But importantly within all of this is making sure that we keep the learner's needs and goals in mind. So bringing it to life using lots of blended approaches, using really good digital tools, which actually have AI built into them now, that tell stories to engage the learner in the learning. Really does help to make that come to life. And something we've just started to dip our toe in that is not AI, but it's immersive technology, is virtual reality. And that's really exciting. And, it's another one of those areas that you have to be really mindful that actually it's quite shiny. So it's not all about suddenly changing the way you do your learning. It's about considering the advantages of something different into your learning blended solutions that you have. So we're going to be dipping our toe a little bit into the virtual reality space, and we've got some new exciting experiences coming up in our face-to-face executive training that will be launched early in the new year to support our sustainability work that we do with banks and other organisations. So that's really exciting because it does get the learner really emotionally connected with the learning.
Thank you. And I might come back to you on one of those points. Jen, is there anything you wanted to add, or just sort of the different ways you're introducing learning? You've mentioned the gig idea, which I think is great, and other things.
Yeah, I mean, so it is a blend, as I say, and it's about offering choice and opportunity to colleagues to tailor it for them. I've mentioned how we already use some of our platforms to help personalize that experience and serve up the right sort of content that will be relevant to colleagues, gigs, secondments. I think the other thing we do is we've developed a set of podcasts. So Learning with NatWest, that's available through all of our major podcast platforms. That gives opportunities for not just our colleagues, but also our customers and communities to learn. And one of the other things we've done, Claire, is actually the NatWest Academy that we've built. We've made that available as well to our customers and our suppliers. Because we recognise it's not just us that's going through this massive skills revolution. You know, it's many of our customers, many of the businesses that we support, many of our suppliers as well. So, you know, why not make that available? Because I think it just again spreads the culture of learning. So it's about, you know, pulling all of that together. The other bespoke program that we've launched in the last sort of 12 months or so is all around leadership, and particularly how our leaders navigate through this, you know, very uncertain world that we're in, you know, with constant, you know, change being the only constant, you know, high level of ambiguity, lots of extreme levels of change, you know, and how do you reinforce a culture of lifelong learning set against that backdrop, and how do leaders navigate through that? So that's another way, I guess, in which we're trying to encourage people to learn, which is to really make it really relevant to the job that they're in right now, but also some of the macro context as well.
Yeah, of which some is just unknown. It's
totally.
No, thank you for that. And I think, you know, that's exciting, the sort of, you know, the AI, the VAR, that's the wrong thing, but virtual reality, that's VAR, that's football, isn't it? But having been dragged by my son to do a virtual reality game with him, it was fascinating. And so, but you mentioned something, Tanya, about emotionally involved there. And I think one of the things, that immersive experience, and my son dragged me to something where we had to shoot each other virtually, so it was slightly different, but it was, you were really immersed into that environment. And it's interesting what you're saying about training, that emotional investment. Tell us a little bit more about what you mean there.
Yeah, so, you know, we know from studies around immersive learning that this really powerful educational tool helps to engage the learner in a way that doesn't actually naturally happen in a lot of the interactions we have. A lot of the immersive learning now includes some real world 3D simulations where learners can really practice and engage with other learners in a risk-free environment that actually makes it very safe to make those mistakes and learn, and actually see in that way actually how they can build confidence around different ways of working or understanding implications of their actions. So having this immersive experience can make it therefore very memorable. So if you're suddenly at home, maybe on your desktop, but it transforms you into the rainforest, for example, if we're thinking about sustainability, and you can actually start engaging with different ways of changing outcomes, perhaps through dashboards or different actions that you take as a banker, you can start to bring in those simulations in a way that's actually going to demonstrate the impact of your decision making. And by actually getting people involved in the outcomes of the things they're doing differently and seeing that behavioural change really does grow that emotional connectivity and thus the memory of that learning. which means that actually they're more likely to do something different when they walk away from the actual offering. And as I know I mentioned, one of the executive face-to-face offerings that we're building around sustainability for the new year, we're starting to test this out. And we'll be working in a testing environment where actually it may work brilliantly. We will have to do some tweaks to it. We have to be very mindful that, as you quite rightly say, wearing those big goggles for some people are not great. So therefore, we're also looking at how do we build that in a way that you can dive in just from your desktop without it, but at the same time having a face-to-face ability as well. So lots of interactivity makes it very, very memorable and therefore emotionally resonant as well.
No, really helpful. And I was talking to someone yesterday at one of the big four consultancies. They're doing some of this virtual reality immersive learning and finding that, as you said, that emotional connection is much, much stronger and has a lasting learning impact, I guess, in some ways, which I find fascinating. I think it's very exciting. I think one thing we also hear a lot about is learning in the flow of work and actually being able to have that content at your fingertips as we go forward. And is that something that firms are working on, you're working on, that having the answer there ready to go? I know that Microsoft are developing things like Copilot and all these tools that can be much, much more intuitive to bring the learning and the answers into the day-to-day. Is that something that you are working on? Jen, you're nodding, so I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing quite a lot of testing on some of those tools at the moment, as you might imagine. I think the other thing that we're really, really encouraging our leaders to do is to become, really skilled and expert in experimentation. We partnered recently with the Institute of Management Development, IMD, who are one of the world's most renowned business schools. And part of the reason we did that was, first of all, for our ExCo to encourage them to bring the outside in, to think a lot about what's going on in the external environment, what's changing for our customers, what's changing for our communities, our stakeholders, what does that mean for our strategy and how we do things. But then also to take what we call our One Bank leadership team, which is our top sort of 160 colleagues around the bank, take them through that experience and really upskill them in experimentation, because we feel this is, going back to our values around being curious about, fulfilling potential. We feel that embedding a culture of experimentation, test, learn, gather data, repeat, trying new things. I think sometimes we have let ourselves get into the notion or the initiative that every time we try something or pilot something, it has to be quite a significant proof of concept. It has to be quite a significant pilot. Whereas I think, modern leaders today, there are short experiments that people can run to really test ideas and concepts that give you a completely different perspective and completely new set of data that may then enable you to be much more agile in developing propositions or services or new ways of working. And so when we talk about taking learning into the flow of the work, that I think is a good example of how we're really encouraging and supporting our leaders to embed that as a real practice within their businesses.
No, thanks, Jen. I think coming back to that leadership point as well, and something you raised earlier about the being able to fail and learn from that, and that not being failure, like piloting things and saying what worked, what didn't, let's move forward, let's innovate. I'm going to come on. We've got some questions that have come in, and if you haven't put your question in, do put it in now. So we've got one here about how should we measure learning? Is that do we on the job learning, informal learning? Is it learning hours? Is it how many people are actively learning, regular learning? And is this something that we can use to incentivize colleagues and managers to prioritize? We can all be competitive if this department's doing more learning. Is that something that you think is possible?
Yes, I mean, I think it's a great question, and it is often one that we sit back and think about, how do you measure not just whether people are doing learning. So of course we do measure, the number of learning hours, how much time people are spending on it, the extent to which that learning is based on skills for the future or the extent to which it's based on compulsory or mandatory type learning. So of course we measure all of that, but I think ultimately it does come down to how are we preparing our colleagues for the future, how are we enabling them to upskill themselves, is the skill base of the organisation, getting richer all the time, and is that enabling us to become more relevant to our customers and therefore be more competitive in the business that we're in. So that's how I think for us, Claire, it's yes, we measure learning hours, we measure the extent to which that is elective learning as opposed to directed, but ultimately for us that translates into what's the skill base of our business, and is that improving, and is that enabling us to deliver a better proposition to our customers?
Thank you. Tanya or Victoria, do you want to come in on that question?
So yes, I mean, I totally agree with Jen. I think when I sit and listen to lots of learning colleagues and educationalists, this is a big topic. It's a big topic of conversation. We have seen mostly most organisations move away from just the sort of basic level of analysing hours spent in the training space or the training room, far more to how is that improving or supporting the impact of behavioural change to deliver the organisation's outcomes and goals. That the ability to get closer and closer to that measurement is really, really important. And it's an area that certainly within the Institute we are looking at very closely to help ensure that organisations can think about how that professionalism that they deliver and their societal role is really enhanced through supporting continuous learning, whether that be through formal education or whether that's actually just through continued growth and learning around the profession. So the impact of delivery is very important. Yeah. And I have seen measures used where it's linked alongside outcomes such as the customer experience, the customer outcomes, as well as internal colleague satisfaction. So it can be used in different measures. It's far less easy to do because you haven't got easy metrics to line up, which is why it's still an area that I would say, Claire, is a good discussion point.
Thank you. Victoria, do you want to add anything there?
Very much the same. I mean, it's how you measure whether the learning is working. That's what we're all looking for, and it's certainly what we as a provider of study materials, content, learning would love to have definite metrics about, but it's not something that you can easily measure in that way. But we are constantly seeking feedback from users of our products and our members and the firms, and it's really important to seek feedback from our member firms to understand what they feel is working and what isn't, and how we can evolve what we're doing and bring in different techniques or methods so that we can enhance people's performance in the workplace, which is what we're all about. Yeah,
thank you. I think I'm hearing as we have this conversation at the Commission quite regularly, it is a basket of measures. It's a number of things you have to look at around. There's no one solution to this. We've got another question that's come in, and this person's asked that everyone on the panel answers this question. What's the most successful initiative that you've come across in your careers that demonstrates how a learning culture can engage and empower employees at work? So I don't know who wants to name their most successful initiative.
So I was thinking back to something in my career when I was actually supporting through the customer voice, the impact of colleague engagement. And I think it is this whole mix of actually having the person, the learner, the student, the employee involved in how they're going to do the behavioural change that became so important, because delivering a change which allowed our customers to have a much louder voice to bring about change in the organisation and develop the ways of working actually meant that our colleagues had to change the way they were operating themselves, because they had to engage more, listen and take some different action. And the things we sort of did to engage differently at that time was we actually did a number of things we talked about today. So from our leadership down through, from the CEO right the way through the organisation, actually have very clear learning and support. But whether that was face-to-face or blended, everybody in the organisation got involved. So it's very clear leadership modeling and behaviors, to the extent that the CEO and the leaders were actually out videoing and doing the changes and the differences themselves, which actually led then to a really big wave of colleague engagement actually getting on board with it. From there, though, and introducing new technologies and systems to support the changes, actually what we then saw was learners doing lots and lots of peer-to-peer learning and self-generated learning, because by being provided with technology and platforms to interact, they were starting to self-direct themselves to working out what the problems were without having to have massive oversight. So they felt part of the solution and the development of the way in which we were changing behaviours. That was really, really very exciting. And as you'd want me to say, but genuinely the outcome for the customers and the business was very successful, in that actually we saw that customer satisfaction improve as a result of the changes, as well as colleague engagement as well. So it's about putting the learner and the person who needs to have the change at the centre of what you're doing, aligned to business and organisational outcomes.
No, thank you. Jen?
There's two examples that spring to mind. One of them's outside our industry, and one of them's inside our industry. I think the one outside our industry, and it is an industry I used to work in, which is the airline industry. I do think that, if you're a professional pilot, it is so ingrained in that sector around learning from mistakes, learning from things that go wrong, continuous reassessment of standard operating procedures. When anything happens, whether it's a issue, safety issue, or something to do with operational management, that I think is just a fantastic culture of continuous improvement, continuous learning, a real sort of honesty and transparency about errors and when things go wrong. And there's complete psychological safety around that. It's so ingrained into the culture and ways of working, and so celebrated and so recognised, that I think that's the reason why we have an incredibly safe airline industry today. So my parallel, I guess, with the financial services sector is, I would love us to get to that point within our own industry. The sort of excuse that's often used, and I think it is an excuse, is around the regulatory nature of a lot of the work that we do. But I think there's a real opportunity, I think, for us to put in place and embed a similar culture where we do experiment, we do test and learn, we do learn from failure, and we do use that to help improve going forward. And that brings me to my second example, which is where I've seen learning done really well in the flow of work in our sector, and that's through our journey teams. The reason why we set up journey teams in financial services is first of all, so we can be much more agile and responsive to changes in customer needs, but also so we can really, really test how that experience is being felt for our customers all the way through every stage of the process. And it is absolutely about learning, from pain points that our customers have, to testing changes, to then building in further improvement. And exactly as Tanya says, if you get this right, not only does it mean that you deliver a better customer experience, and I think there's so much evidence of that from the work that we've done on journeys, but also you build better colleague engagement, you build better retention, you build better controls. So it wins right the way across the balanced scorecard. And so just two examples that spring to mind, Claire, one from outside our sector and one within.
No, thank you. Very, very helpful. And Victoria?
It's probably going back a few years now, but I used to work very closely with the water industry. And one of the things that they did at the time, and it echoes some of what Tanya and what Jen have said, it's obviously a very, very regulated industry, but you also have a loud consumer voice in terms of us all having water that comes out of our taps. And there was a need to ensure that people working in that industry were constantly ensuring that they were up to date with everything they needed to be, both in terms of skills and in regulation, but they were actively embedding those skills and the regulatory knowledge that they needed in their daily work, we were working with a training provider who put in place a series of small, short skills tests that were very informal, were taken on the job as people were going along, and they were used by the companies to inform the training needs of those people and the development. But it meant that because it wasn't a formally examined kind of situation, it allowed people that psychological safety to, yes, make mistakes if that was the case, but then also there was remedial work going on in the background and training that was tailored to the individual's requirements as to the gaps in the knowledge and skills that they needed to fill. So again, very, very, very similar. It's putting the individual and making sure that the individual is living and breathing what they need to deliver at the heart of the learning programme. But in the end, it had huge benefits for the companies and for the customers.
No, thank you. And really, really interesting. And I love the examples from other sectors. And I'll put my own in here that my background is largely public sector, so central and local government. And one of the key things that sticks with me is how there was a sort of real drive at learning. And you turn up to, this was very kind of sit in front of a speaker kind of learning. It was years ago. And the chief exec would quite often turn up and sit at the back. And it just really legitimised the fact that this was for everybody and nobody was above the fact of having to learn. And you really did, that was clocked quickly. And people saw that, you know, you could, if the leader's going to value it, we should as well. And it just really made a big difference psychologically. There's one more question I'm going to pose to you, but before I do that, I've just been asked to mention that the annual banking conference is the 14th and 15th of November.
14th and 15th, you're absolutely right. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and I think there's a link to the conference in the chat, so if people want to find out more, they can do that. You were ahead of yourself. You're so keen. You wanted to get there. The final question is what are you learning at the moment? What's your current thing you're looking at? One thing that I'm learning at the moment is about prompt engineering. I've been watching some LinkedIn series of videos. I've not quite finished the whole set yet, because I've been playing around with ChatGPT and just having a bit of a play with it. But asking a question a slightly different way gets you a slightly different answer. And I just want to understand how best to frame the question. So that's my bit of learning at the moment, that prompt engineering piece and tokenization and things. It's quite interesting. But again, it's all on LinkedIn. So who wants to go next of what you're learning just now?
I'm doing a lot of learning on AI actually at the moment. Not so much about the use cases and how it could be applied, but more about how do you, I suppose, build a business that has AI, you know, at its heart in terms of, you know, how journeys are developed, digital first processes, and really how do you marry the best of technology, in this case AI, but also with human empathetic relationships, which are obviously at the heart of banking. So I'm doing some courses on that at the moment, and in fact I'm spending some time with a number of other practitioners learning about that in a few weeks' time. So that's top of my list at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Tanya.
So just to follow the drill for a moment, AI, like yourself, Claire, I'm learning and understanding how to get better use out of AI. So doing some of those Google courses actually are there as well, but playing with it and using it actually in my flow of work to make it more efficient has been really helpful. And at the same time, I'm in the flow of work learning as well, having moved into a new job over the last 6 months. So lots of in the flow work, which is fantastic. And at the same time, trying to just think a little bit to Jen's point, but not so much through the digital space, but just thinking about efficiencies in the work in the organisation in which I work in, to see how we can make sure that the way we organise, use technology and each other helps us to be more efficient. And I will do a plug for Jo Murphy here, because she suggested I read the shorter book, which I am in the middle of. I'll turn around a minute and tell you who the author is, but looking at actual efficiencies in the work.
No, thank you. And we've not got very long, so Victoria, last Last session.
To echo everybody else, it is AI, but also actually specifically how we can use that in a qualifications type of environment, and to perhaps stop seeing it as a threat and to see the opportunities that it can offer.
Thank you. Well, we are out of time. Really interesting, and we're all looking at AI in a way, so that's interesting in itself. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to the panelists and the team at CBI for organising it. The recording of the session will be available shortly, and if you have any follow-up questions, do contact Melissa and the team on email. But thank you very much and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thank you.